Two-part polyurethane varnishes are probably amongst the most difficult products to master in terms of application. However, they can deliver exceptional levels of gloss, a hard-wearing and scratch-resistant surface, and fantastic UV protection for the substrate beneath. In this video, we're going to take a quick look through the basics that you will need to know in order to apply the Epifanes Polyurethane Clear Varnish. This is an extreme gloss two-part pure clear varnish that has great UV resistance, great gloss retention and scratch resistance. This is well suited to standing up against the elements in all conditions, including harsh tropical environments. It can be applied over all existing two-part varnish systems or an epoxy resin base coat. It can also be applied over the top of polyurethane paint systems, should you wish to gain an increased depth of colour and gloss, surface protection, or just a well blended and sealed multi-surface finish where varnish systems meet into paint systems. This varnish can also be applied as a complete standalone clear finish to bare wood. For best results, application should be done by brush or roller, so let's take a look at how that's done. If you're building a finished system onto bare wood, then a product I recommend using initially is the Epifanes PP Varnish. This is a fast building two-part clear build-up varnish that allows rapid overcoating and quick filling of the wood grain. Take a look at some of my other quick guide videos on the application of this product to get you started. If you're applying onto bare wood and using the polyurethane varnish from the start, begin by sanding the bare wood to no finer than 180 grit. Sand in the direction of the wood grain to avoid creating cross-grain scratches. And once you've sanded, vacuum off any remaining dust, degrease the surface. This can be done with the Epifanes Polyurethane spray thinner, denatured alcohol or methylated spirits. If you are applying over an existing Epifanes PP varnish base or an existing paint or varnish system, then sand the surface to no finer than 220 grit and degrease this in the same way. Now, this is a two-component varnish, which means that both components need to be mixed together at the correct ratio in order for it to cure. The mixed ratio for this is 2:1, and that can be measured by either volume or weight. Measure out your desired weight of component A into a mixing cup, then add half of that weight on again with component B and mix the two together thoroughly. You have an induction time with this product, meaning that it wants to sit for a while to allow the reaction between both components to begin. Once mixed, leave the product in the mixing cup for around 10 minutes at 20 degrees C or 68 F. Thin the first coat on bare wood at anything from 10 to 15% by volume. The Epifanes polyurethane brush thinner would be my recommendation for this. The addition of thinner will give good penetration into the wood fibres for the first coat. If applying over an existing base such as Epifanes PP Varnish or any other existing polyurethane finish, including paint, then thin at 10%. This varnish is specifically formulated for application by brush or roller. Should you wish to use spray application for your finish, then take a look at the Epifanes Speed Coat product instead. And I've got a quick guide tutorial for that product on my channel. The Epifanes Multipren foam rollers are ideal for application of this paint, as are these Anza felt rollers, which are my personal preference, as they hold up really well against two-part products. Okay, now when it comes to application, polyurethane paints are really quite nasty with regards to fumes, so I definitely recommend that you wear a mask whilst applying this. I'm going to leave this off just for a minute because I'm going to explain to you how to apply it, and you won't be able to hear me if I've got the mask on. So with polyurethane finishes, we want to work relatively quickly if possible and condense our workpiece down into smaller working areas so that we can move on quickly from the area and allow the varnish to flow out with plenty of time. So I'll show you how we do that with both roller and brush application. So I'm going to load up my roller. And then I'm going to work it out in two different directions. So I'll typically go vertically initially, but that might depend a little bit on what I'm working on. And then I go horizontally, so we can get this varnish distributed really quickly, nice and evenly. Then what I'm going to do is one final pass, which I call my tipping pass. Most people would do this with a brush. This can be done with a roller as well. So what I'm going to do here is start just slightly into the dry section. With a dry roller, I wouldn't apply any more to the roller. Start there and come through and then lift. And just do a final pass to get rid of any marking in the surface there. And what I'm also doing here is just feathering this edge so that when I move into the next section, I'm not going to have a hard line there if it takes me a little while to get there. So I'm going to apply it like that. Now that section is signed off, I can leave it alone. I don't want to touch that any further. I can move on to the next bit. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to feather this section into that one so that we can constantly keep that evolving and leave the varnish alone on that surface as quickly as possible. So I'm going to come in here, just start slightly away from the next section so I can gauge how much is on my roller. Come and roll that in vertically. Going to come back into the first section ever so slightly. Do my horizontal roll just to get things nice and evenly distributed. And then I'm going to do my final tip pass. Start slightly in the dry, come through and then just lift as I come into that previous section. And that is that section now signed off. Don't want to touch that any further. Don't want to touch this any further other than that little feather into there. Do exactly the same thing with a brush. If we're doing brush application, I'm going to go vertical strokes first of all. Then I'm going to go horizontal strokes just to get that nicely evenly distributed. Then I'm going to tip the varnish. Again, no more varnish on the brush. Start in the dry section, come through and then just lift as I get through into that previous section. Now you can do this with a combination of the two. You can apply it with a roller and then tip it with a brush. You can apply it with the brush and tip it with the brush, or you can apply it with the roller and tip it with the roller. It's up to you what you want to do, and based on what your surface might actually be, might kind of dictate that for you. So again, that section's signed off, this section's signed off. We're going to do this last little portion here. Get that applied and distributed in two different directions. And then finish up with that tipping pass just to even it out. And there we go. Now, in reality, I'd probably do all of this in one section, but this shows you, with it, using this technique, how we can break sections of the boat or the surface that we're working on down into smaller sections so that we can then divide that up and just get that on, worry about that, move on to the next section and feather those edges between the two. Now you're going to want to do that more in scenarios where you're going to have less working time, so the hotter it gets, the smaller you might want to condense those sections. In good conditions, I would quite typically apply on a section at least this size, possibly even square, and feather either edge of it and then move on. As things get hotter, you might want to reduce those sections down a little bit further. That just allows maximum flow out time for the product. It allows you to move on, and you're not going to get as many brush or drag marks in the surface or orange peel in the finish, and let it flow out for as long as you possibly can. Now that's a pretty brief overview of the typical brush and roller techniques that I'll use for applying varnishes. If you want to learn even more in-depth techniques and tutorials for applying varnishes and epoxies of all different types, then make sure you check out my online course for varnishing. There'll be much more in-depth tutorials than that, and it'll get you really great finishes and cover the entire process start to finish, from tools and preparation right through to final finishing and dust control. Subsequent coats of varnish can be applied without the need for sanding in between coats, providing that they are applied within a 24 to 48 hour window. This is very helpful when it comes to building multiple coats without the need for sanding processes in between. If you are applying outside of this window, or you have the need to sand the surface a little to get it flatter, then you should sand the previous coat to a grade of no finer than 220 grit. Prior to the final coat of application, it's recommended that you sand a little finer here. Anything up to 400 grit would be suitable. This will help to give a smoother substrate upon which to apply your final coat without any sanding scratches showing through in the final finish. Sanding finer than 400 grit is not recommended. If you've sanded, as before, vacuum off any remaining dust, degrease the surface again, and then apply your next coat. Drying times for this varnish are going to be around 20 hours at 25 degrees C or 77F, 24 hours at 20 degrees C or 68F, 30 hours at 15 degrees C or 59F, and 48 hours at 10 degrees C or 50F. Application below 10 degrees C or 50F and above 30 degrees C or 68F is not recommended. Whilst we are on the subject of conditions, I should mention outdoor working. Now, any paint or varnish system applied outside is going to involve compromises in what you're able to achieve due to varying conditions. Working in direct sunlight should be avoided at all costs, as this will rapidly strip out the solvents from the product and give you a very short working time. This will make getting a good finish very difficult. Flow out will be greatly reduced, and you are highly likely to see orange peel or brush marks in the finish. Moderate to high levels of wind will also do the same thing. Polyurethane finishes are particularly susceptible to these effects, so consider that if you are applying in outdoor conditions, the performance will be easily affected if conditions are not perfect. What are perfect conditions, I hear you ask? Well, ideally a warm day at around 20 degrees C or 68F, overcast without any direct sunlight, very still as well with next to no wind, and of course free from anywhere that is likely to kick up a lot of dust, such as a boatyard. Being on the water is actually very favourable here, as that's a really good thing for dust control. Undercover is always preferable, of course, as it gives more control. So just bear in mind that if you are working in not very favourable outdoor conditions, then some of the single part varnish systems may be a better alternative, as they're likely to get you great results that will account for less than ideal conditions and probably perform a little more easily. So there we go, an extreme gloss, hard wearing, scratch resistant 2-part clear varnish formulated for brush and roller applications. If you have any questions, then feel free to ask them in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer them or put them to the technical team at Epifanes if I'm not able. Cheers guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.